We've already formed a quorum, and it's also time for us to start. So let's start. This is the first meeting of the panel on manpower in 2015. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting. Members, any comments on the minutes? Any comments now? We have not received any proposal for amendment before the meeting. If there's no comment, can I have the minutes confirmed? All right. Item 2 on the agenda, information papers issued since the last meeting. A number of papers have been issued. One is a letter from a concerned group on public transport. Paper 580/01, dated the 15th of December last year. And then Mr. Tang Ka-piu wrote in on the 7th of January. It's paper 602/01. And we have a third letter from a concerned group on standard working hours, dated the 8th of January this year, paper 640/01. Discussion items for the next meeting. Please invite the government representatives to come in. We have a list of outstanding items for discussion and a list of follow-up actions, which have already been distributed to you. We welcome from the Labour and Welfare Bureau, Mr. Matthew Chung, the Secretary, Ms. Annie Tam, the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Donald Tong, the Commissioner for Labour, and then Mr. Byron Ng, the Deputy Commissioner for Labour, and Mr. David Leung, the Deputy Commissioner for Labour. Welcome. Date of the next meeting. As we have to accommodate the Lunar New Year, we've changed that to the 10th of February, a Tuesday, at 10:45 a.m. Any objection? All right, 10:45 a.m. on the 10th of February. Discussion items. The Bureau has proposed 2 items. The first one is work safety of repair, maintenance, alteration, and addition works. Is item 19 on the list of outstanding issues. The second proposal is findings of a survey on the taking of statutory holidays and general holidays by employees. That's item 10 on the list of outstanding issues. Any comments? Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan. Mr. Chairman, I have a public request here. That's about the WITS scheme. It has been in place for 2 years, and we should have a major review. But we have not heard anything from the administration. I heard that they're doing preparation. I recall that they should have completed the review last year, but now they're still not ready. I would like to have a public hearing such that before we have the review results from the administration, we can listen to the public such that the administration can absorb opinion from the public and publish the consultation results as soon as possible. I believe the administration is already conducting the review. If it works behind closed door, then it's black box operation. We should listen to public views as far as possible. So we should provide a platform to take public opinion rather than leaving the secretary to work behind closed door. Our next meeting will be in February. Maybe we can advance that meeting to 10 a.m. and the meeting will last till 1 p.m. Would that be all right? Administration, any comments? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for your suggestion. We have already started the review on the scheme. We started at the end of last year. Before the middle of the first half of this year, we would like to complete the review. If you want us to report, to have a public hearing in February, maybe we can have a more relaxed timetable. I think on our part, there shouldn't be any problems. Well, we're also willing to attend a special meeting if you so wish. We actually started the review. All right, no comments from the administration. The other colleagues, any comments? Dr. Kwakaki and then Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Mr. Chairman, I agree with Mr. Lee Chak-yan. 3 odd years have passed since 2011. If the Secretary doesn't mind, it is worthwhile to have a special meeting. I believe many deputations will come, and we already have 2 items for the next meeting. WITS scheme is very important for the grassroots workers, so it's worthwhile to have a special meeting. Of course, Mr. Chairman, if we have sufficient time at the next regular meeting, by all means discuss it next time. But we shouldn't be too hasty in our discussion. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, I echo Mr. Lee Chak-yan's suggestion. I hope that the Secretary, at least before the public hearing, can give us a briefing on the latest implementation details. Maybe he should just give us some figures, some hard facts. Mr. Chairman, we are willing to do so. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, I'd like to thank the Secretary for the review, but there must be a direction for the review. Otherwise, the review is meaningless. Just now, some deputations expressed certain views. The subsidy is not enough at the moment. Will you work on that? What about the number of participants? Or you just complete the review and full stop? So, Mr. Secretary, what's the direction of the review? Secretary, our review is a comprehensive one. We've promised it. Well, the scheme has been in place for 3 years. Have we attained our objectives? Any problems with application procedures? Is it effective? Can it help with employment, etc., etc.? So it will be a comprehensive review. We won't just look at the figures. Well, what about the amount of subsidy? We'll, of course, look at that. We'll have to obtain data from the Census and Statistics Department. The $600 was not invented by us. A few years ago, the CNS Department gave us some data for cross-district transport expenses, $400. So we didn't invent the figure. So we'll see whether we have any latest figures. We'll consider the amount in the review. As members all agree that we should have a meeting to discuss the issue, perhaps we should go about it like this. The clerk will first issue a circular to see how many people will come. If many are to come, we may need a special meeting. We may not have enough time to lengthen the next meeting because before the next meeting, there's a PWSE meeting. So maybe we can add 1 hour to the next meeting if possible. If the feedback is very enthusiastic and many deputations asked to come, then we may need to have a special meeting. All right? So that's it. Then, there's another issue that I have to mention. In a moment, we have to discuss the setting up of 2 subcommittees under this panel. One is about the MPF offsetting mechanism and the other one about standard working hours. By that time, the officials may have left. As they are still here, I'd like to have the administration's opinion on the proposals. For example, what's the latest progress? When will the report be published? So that our members will note the information. In a moment when we discuss whether or not to set up the 2 subcommittees, we can have some information in mind. I understand that members intend to set up 2 subcommittees. Well, we haven't decided to set up the committees yet. We're going to discuss the issue. Well, let me report on the latest progress of the 2 issues. One is the standard working hours. The other one is the offsetting severance payment arrangement. The MPF authority, well, we have a high-level committee on standard working hours, which has been working with full steam, with 24 members, and Dr. Leung Chi-hong as the chairman. And the commissioner and the permanent secretary, the economist, the government economist, and the permanent secretary of the Economic Development Bureau, and some scholars sit on the committee. So it's a quadripartite task force. Here I'd like to thank Dr. Leung for seriously leading the task force. Originally, we planned to come back to this panel with a report in March, so members can consider whether or not a subcommittee is required. Now, in the course of their work, what did they do? First of all, they'd like to build up widespread discussion amongst the general public. And for data collection. Now, it is very important to be data-oriented because standard working hours is a very important issue which will have far-reaching implications. If that is implemented in all industries and trades, there will be far-reaching implications. Well, they've already completed their work. The first working group is for publicity. They analyze public opinion, for example. The other working group work on data and statistics. They commissioned a consultancy to survey 10,000 respondents covering employers and employees. And this is the first time when employees are interviewed. So the data collected will be very objective, and the data will be submitted to the committee itself, and then they will decide on the next step to take. But before the end of their term of office, they have to complete the analysis of the data and the positioning of the policy on standard working hours and the way ahead. So there's a committee working with full steam. We'll come back to explain to you in March. That's point number 1. As regards offsetting severance payments, this is a very complicated issue. If it is implemented, we have to be very careful in our deliberation because SMEs will be affected. 98% of Hong Kong's enterprises are SMEs, and 330,000 foreign domestic helpers are working in Hong Kong. In future, there will be a whole series of issues to be ironed out. We shouldn't neglect these areas, so we have to be very careful in handling the whole matter.
And the MPF authority, as you all know, it operates under the Financial Services Bureau, and the 2 bureaus are working together, and the Labor and Welfare Bureau is also happy to help since the issue of labor is involved. So please give the administration some time, give the government a chance to listen to all your views, and in order to tackle the problem. So we are still listening to various views. All right. Thank you very much, Secretary. When we reach the 6th item on the agenda, we will discuss the potential appointment of these two subcommittees and their respective terms of reference. Let's move on to the fourth item on our agenda. Can I invite the Secretary to outline the CE's 2015 policy address? Chairman, members, I'll be brief. We've shared the papers with you, so I don't want to repeat myself. So I'd like to talk about two aspects, manpower and welfare. And the key of our policy is to unleash labor potential and maximize the use of manpower. We have pinpointed women, people under poverty, ethnic minority, etc., and we have specific initiatives for each sector. We hope to foster an elderly-friendly working environment. A lot of our elderly people have retired early, so we are coming up with ways to encourage them to re-enter the labor force. We've set up a dedicated website, and we'll also hold more job fairs for the elderly and attempt to change the market culture. And we'll also introduce an incentive scheme, and we offer a maximum of $3,000 as on-the-job training allowance for employers. And this scheme also extends to part-time workers or part-time elderly workers. And for persons with disabilities, our existing follow-up service period is 3 months, and we'll extend that to 6 months. And in Hong Kong, there are 60,000 ethnic minority members, and I think this is a sector we should make good use of. And through large job fairs, we will introduce more openings for EMs. And in Shengshui, we have a large number of openings available for ethnic minorities. And the Labor Department also hired a number of young EM trainees as service ambassadors. Hopefully, through these ambassadors, they can help their fellow ethnic minority friends. And this program has been in place for a few months, and the impacts are rather obvious. And the Employees Retraining Board also has an important role to play. And poverty alleviation and facilitating employment is one of its primary goals. And specifically, they would help women and people under poverty. And they also have a modular certificate accumulation system for people who cannot find time to attend courses. And they will be given flexibility, and they are also encouraged to upgrade themselves. And according to the chief executive, we face a serious problem of manpower shortage in the construction industry, and there's aging in our pool of workers. I understand that if we expand the supplementary labor scheme, the local workforce might be jeopardized. So we are coming up with a win-win situation to protect the interests of our workers. Hopefully, we will be able to step up our initiatives and maximize our labor force. These two schemes would not jeopardize the interests of the workers, nor would it affect the workers' wages. And in terms of statutory minimum rates, we will revise the rate to $32.5, which is equivalent to a rise of 8.3%, and 150,000 people will benefit. And hopefully this will be implemented on the 1st of May. And for statutory paternity leave, the legislative process has started, and if all goes according to plan, And hopefully paternity leave will be enforced on the 27th of February. And for employees who have babies born after that date, they will be able to enjoy the relevant provisions. And for the Working Holiday Scheme, or WHS, we will step up our efforts in the coming year to join hands with more member countries. And at the moment, we have 10 member countries taking part in this program, and almost 60,000 youths in Hong Kong have participated in this scheme to accumulate experience in life and work. And so this scheme has proved very popular, and hopefully more and more young people can benefit. I'm not going to repeat myself with standard working hours, and I also talked about WITS scheme. And we will step up our law enforcement measures to ensure workplace safety, and we will also step up education and promotion efforts. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. Some of our members have questions to ask. Let me read out the list of names. Mr. Wong Kok-heng, Kok Ka-ki, Mr. Lee Chok-yan, Mr. Hun Xiuping, Leung Chi-chang, Dr. Ann Chang, Mr. Chung Kwok-pan, Mr. Tang Ka-piu, Mr. Sin Chung Kai, Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. We have a total of 10 members. 4 minutes each, including question and answer, please. Mr. Wong Kok-heng. Chairman, I have 2 questions for the Secretary. And regarding paragraphs 104 to 105 of the policy address, it's concerned with the imports of labor, and the FTU is against the import of labor in order to protect the interests of local workers. So my question for the government is, they mentioned that they have certain optimized initiatives, and we are concerned that such optimized measures would surpass monitoring from LAB, because at the moment the supplementary labor scheme must be approved by the LAB, and this is so as such the LAB is an important gatekeeper, and their monitoring has proved effective in the past. And in paragraph 105 of the policy address, the government mentioned that they would safeguard the interests of local workers. So my question is, how can you ensure that local workers be given priority in employment? And the other question is, and in paragraph 147 of the policy address, as far as minimum wage is concerned, and in the coming May, when the ordinance comes into force, the minimum wage rate will be revised to $32.5. And even with the revised rate at $32.5 per hour, I think most workers will be concerned with whether we will have an annual review of the SMW rates in order to safeguard their living quality. So these are my 2 questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. And I'd like to stress that the optimized scheme for CI industry would not affect local workers. The optimization proposal of LAB has already been enforced since April last year. And in the past, the LAB usually needed 7 to 8 months before their applications were approved. So we are aiming to shorten this this time scale, and And recently, the application time span has been shortened to about 4 to 5 months. So we have seen some success. And for imported skilled labor, we are aiming to maximize their productivity. After discussions between the Development Bureau and the Trade, the Chief Executive announced that the construction industry is unique in a way that various jobs are all interconnected. And if we cannot find enough workers for one area, the other areas will also be affected. So we do require imported staff, and if for some reason the imports is delayed, then we will have problems in other areas. And in the future, if the construction industry needs to recruit more workers, we can try to facilitate that. But that said, we will still have stringent monitoring. Please be brief. Time is rather tight today. I understand that a lot of workers are concerned with the monitoring. So under the LAB stipulations, the Construction Industry Council has also introduced computerized systems to specify that specific workers must work at specific sites, and relevant labor officers will be assigned to follow up on the work of these imported laborers. So we have a very stringent process. Members, if you expect more detailed answers from the government, please allow them more time. Time is very tight today, so we cannot go over time. Mr. Kokaki, please raise your voice. He's not speaking into the microphone. Mr. Kokaki, Chairman, I think the Secretary should also speak to the microphone. In the policy address this year, I think the imports of foreign labor is something which really hamper the local workers. From what you said, it seems that the Chief Executive and yourself are not working the same team. For grassroots workers and educated or middle-class laborers, the grassroots workers, especially construction workers, are the ones who suffer, and our young people, for example, universal graduates, would also suffer. And some people wonder whether there is a talent list, but a lot of sources pointed out that the government has discussed having such a talent list before.
Secretary, please tell us honestly whether or not you had discussions on this talent list, which will impact on our young people, be it the VTC or whatever institutions. Young people would like to have more opportunities. If you import talents, you'll be dealing them a huge blow. And much discussion was spent on the construction industry. Now we have the 10 major infrastructure projects in one go. We now see all the bad consequences. Originally, we wanted to improve the work environment. Construction safety, industrial safety are still our problems, and there are traps everywhere in our construction sites. And what about casual labor and part-time jobs? Can we turn them into full-time jobs? You can go to Japan and South Korea and you'll see that their construction sites are very clean. then the only way out is to import labor or to have a talent list. The grassroots and the middle class have no prospect and no opportunities. If you adopt this approach, we know that on the mainland many talents are waiting to come. Is it that you want to change blood to speak in the workplaces? Be it laborers or learned people, they will be at risk. Secretary, well, earlier the CS administration also clarified that we had not started work on that. The Labor and Welfare Bureau was tasked to start a feasibility study. I mean the feasibility of a talent list. I don't know where the talent list you mentioned emerged. For example, social workers, as they say. I don't see any need for importing social workers. So we haven't started work yet. You need not worry at all. We'll give priority to local employees, of course. But of course, for Hong Kong's future development, we need talents. So for this talent list, we first of all have to understand the experience and practices in other jurisdictions. And then, what should Hong Kong do? We haven't yet started our study yet. So you need not worry. We don't have any draft proposals. We don't have any decisions. But we have an aging workforce and population. Starting from 2018, the workforce will drop from 3.7 million people to 3.5 million people in 20 years' time. But any solution must not affect the job opportunities of local workers. We must have quality, high-quality talents. We're not talking about talents who are to compete with our young graduates. So rest assured that we'll be very careful with this issue. As for construction sites, we continuously discuss with the Development Bureau and the like. There's plenty of room for improvement in our construction sites. We'll work more on that. Mr. Lee Chok-yan, Mr. Chairman, in a moment, I'll submit this to the Secretary. This is about the WITS scheme. Now, for the labor portion in the policy address, you'll see that all those protection measures have remained stagnant. Standard working hours, stagnant. Offsetting severance payments mechanism, stagnant. Statutory minimum wage, an additional $2.5 in 2 years' time, and we have to wait till the 1st of May for implementation. No progress in the protection of labor, but there's progress in labor importation. There are two major issues there. First of all, in the construction industry, as the CTU said, is bogus recruitment. You attend an interview, but you are to assume duty only a few months afterwards. In fact, with the labor shortage, the candidate should be asked to assume duty immediately. Why wait for several months? So, Secretary, by the enhanced SLS, how many quotas have you granted? Now, we have two different versions from the administration. The labor sector of the LAB said that they oppose the proposal, but Mr. Ng Chao-pak refused to say whether or not he would support the proposal. And just now, Mr. Wong Kwok-hing said that he would object to the proposal. Ms. Chen Yun-han and Mr. Wong Kwok-hing, you're from the FTU. Tell us whether Mr. Ng Chao-pak will oppose the proposal. And how many quotas have you granted? With the new measure, the imported laborers will not be confined to a particular industry. They can shift to another project. That means they're not confined to one project. Say, after working for 2 years, they may work for another project. So they are standing in the way of local workers. Why not? But the government disregards that. Another issue is that labor importation will affect the grassroots. And then upward mobility on the part of young people will also be affected. Just now the Secretary denied that there's a talent list. But then in the Committee on Population Policy, there was a talent list covering teachers, social workers, etc. Secretary, you actually admitted that you would like to have a talent list. After having a talent list, are you opening a floodgate to admit anybody? You want upward mobility for the university graduates, but now you are cutting the ladder for upward mobility and they will fall down. So, not proper for the grassroots, not proper for the middle class, not proper for the employees. You favor the bosses. Well, let me say something about Hon TANG Ka-piu. I asked him, he said that he didn't know what you were talking about. This is an SLS. Every year there were many applications for their consideration. He didn't know which batch of applications you're referring to. So he was unable to answer your question. So don't think that he cannot answer your question. It's just because he didn't know what you're asking for. Everybody knows my question. Only Hon TANG Ka-piu doesn't know. I don't know how you can serve as LAB members. Well, you have to clarify things first before you criticize others. Secretary, allow me to respond. I have to give 1 more minute to Mr. Lee Chak-yan. First of all, I do not admit that we are regressing. We're actually progressing on many issues. Don't misunderstand that we're opening a floodgate to stand in the way of young people, etc. No, it's just the opposite. Precisely, but the importation of professionals and talents is nothing new to Hong Kong. Otherwise, Hong Kong will not be a cosmopolitan city, a metropolis in the world. But first of all, we have to conduct a feasibility study. Secondly, even if we have a talent list, it doesn't mean that everybody will be admitted. The Immigration Department will have some deliberation on that. The list is just for reference. Certain job types can be considered. So there's no question of opening the floodgate. As regards the LAB, there are 2 issues. The LAB has been considering the SLS applications for a long time. We received about 18 applications under the enhanced scheme. Between June to July, through recruitment exercises, we managed only to handle 2 applications which were approved, and 180 persons were covered. There were 4 weeks of open recruitment, successfully recruiting 32 local workers. So not all of them are foreign laborers. We recruited 32 in local recruitment exercises in those 4 weeks. And after that, some applicants actually withdrew the applications, proving that we are very fair. As regards LAB operations, they are confidential, so it's not convenient for me to disclose anything here. So we're open, just, and transparent in handling all applications. Well, Mr. Chairman, just now you asked me which batches. It's those 2 batches. It's useless for you to tell me because I'm not an LAB member. Tell Hon TANG Ka-piu instead. So my question was clear. Don't pretend I mentioned those 2 batches. Mr. Poon Siu Ping. Thank you, Chairman. The 3rd policy address of the CE in terms of labor policy only carries 8 characters. That's rather disappointing. He didn't mention his previous undertakings. We're all concerned about labor importation. If you look at the policy agenda, something is mentioned about the retail industry and the catering industry, saying that there's manpower shortage. Just now the Secretary said that there won't be any new mechanism. We'll stick to the SLS. But in actual fact, the Immigration Department is looking at policies for importing labor. Half of the quotas approved cover wages at the level of $20,000. I don't know how the two bureaus are operating. Will the LWB serve as the gatekeeper? There's manpower shortage in the construction industry, all along with reservation over labor importation. For the PWDs and ethnic minorities, you'll help with their employment. But what about the 150 quotas for mainlanders? What will you do for them? And for the construction industry, if you want to attract young people, one crucial matter is safety. I read your information. 2014, when compared with 2013 in terms of inspection, improvement notices, etc., they've been on the rise, but then the number of accidents has not dropped. Any new measures to make the industry safer so as to attract more young people? Secretary, thank you. First of all, we are very stringent in gatekeeping. For the construction industry, you mentioned the new arrivals and so forth. You would like to attract them to join the industry. Precisely, we've been doing this in past years. $1 billion will be injected into the CIC for the semi-skilled workers. For those trained under the CIC, they're semi-skilled workers. They have to gain more experience on construction sites. Usually, it will take them about a year to become skilled workers. I fully support your views on construction safety. 13,000 people have, through CIC training programs, joined the industry. They're successfully trained. Of course, some people have changed jobs. Still, many have remained. We attach importance to construction safety. In the last year, when compared with the preceding year, there's a slight improvement. But one incident is too many for us. Last year we have 20. The year before last we had 22. Still, the figure is on the high side. Anyway, we would like to give young people prospects and safety in the construction industry. Thank you. Mr. Poon Siu Ping, a few more seconds. Can the LAB further monitor the other quotas for labor importation under the Immigration Department? Well, we have our respective functions. The Labor Department will focus on skilled workers. The foregoing are not managed by us. The line is drawn at the level of technicians. Next, Mr. Leung Chi-chung. Thank you, Chairman. In this year's policy address, how to enhance the workforce is mentioned. In particular, it said that elderly persons should be encouraged to join the job market again. That is to provide an elderly-friendly environment. In many industries and trades, 60 years old is the retirement age. Between 60 and 65, in those 5 years, the elderly persons can help ease manpower shortage in the job market.
I have a few questions for the Secretary, whether the Bureau has really helped these elderly people to re-enter the labor market. And I think for those aged 60 to 65, it won't be a big problem. But for older people, their choices will naturally be different. With regards to this elderly population, has the Bureau or the insurance industry done anything to help them in order to encourage them to enter the labor market? And for elderly employment, we are looking at a number of issues. For those aged 65 or above, they can enjoy transport subsidies. But for those aged 60 to 65, they are not considered senior citizens and as such do not enjoy any concessions. So they have less benefits compared with those above 65. So would you lower the thresholds for your for transportation subsidies from 65 to 60? And the second question is about imported labor. And in paragraph 18 of the paper, you said the construction industry is facing serious manpower shortage and aging. Do you have any concrete statistics on hand on the specific number of shortage for different types of jobs? And for elderly-friendly measures such as insurance, this has been outlined in our report. They shouldn't have any problem purchasing labor insurance. The only question is price. But for certain high-risk industries who face issues, the insurance industry has drawn up a new system a few years ago to ensure that labor insurance can be taken out. Secretary, can you speak to the microphone, please, because we cannot really hear you very clearly. And this system has been in place for some time, and so far it has been effective. And we will also work with the relevant insurance boards and alliances, and together with the Labor Department, we will hold a series of seminars for employers to talk about the issue of labor insurance for elderly people. And for imported labor, I'd like to outline a few points. According to the CIC statistics, in the next 5 years, we are going to face a shortage of 10 to 15,000 workers, 10 to 15,000 construction workers, and across 26 job types. In terms of training, these are areas of priorities. Steel workers, soldering workers, etc. These are some examples. And this list of 26 job types with manpower shortage will form the basis of our study. And in terms of lowering the threshold for transport subsidy from 65 to 60, it might be challenging for us. Our WITS review will complete in March, so perhaps we will wait until March to see whether we can consider lowering the threshold in the next phase of the program. Dr. N. Cheng. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on the issue of imported labor as well. Secretary, and I'm one of the victims, so to speak. And in the 80s to 90s, a lot of factories had problems recruiting workers. We took out a lot of newspaper ads every day, but yet we couldn't find the hands. And accumulated the advertisement receipts, and I sent them to labor unions, and at that time all the unions objected to the import of labor. And during that time, in the 1980s, we spent at least $100,000 every year in advertisements. So let's be fair. I think a lot of labor unions are reasonable. But the issue is that you haven't clarified a lot of issues. A lot of employers face labor shortage, but yet sometimes the government is trying to force its way into certain imported labor arrangements. So my suggestion is, in Canada, if employers need to recruit, let's say if they need 30 construction workers, the employers would post advertisements on their boards. And within 1 month, if they cannot recruit the people or workers, then the government would supplement the shortfall. So this would be a clear and transparent approach. So I think this is a way to ensure that to confirm whether the employers really could not recruit local workers. So I think this is one suggestion you can take on board. At the end of the day, a lot of factories have relocated to China as a result. And for the working holiday scheme, I understand that a lot of young people are aware of this scheme and they are very, very interested. They hope that before they leave Hong Kong, they can obtain more information about the jobs available. Can the Labor Department of Hong Kong work with the Labor Department of Australia, so to speak, and prepare information about some job vacancies available, so that before the young people embark on their journey, they can know about the vacancies in different cities, say like in Sydney, and so they can find a job as soon as possible abroad. And I want to talk about part-time employment in the elderly community, would it affects their chance of receiving old age allowance. The consensus in the LAB is that all imported laborers must undergo a 4-week recruitment process at the LAB. And we would also approach the labor unions in order to obtain referrals. So this has always been a very effective measure. And for the working holiday scheme, your questions was very interesting. And we would work with the relevant consulate generals. Recently, we approached the Irish consulate general, and he promised to us that in the future, for youngsters who are interested in visiting Ireland, they are happy to organize briefing sessions. And for part-time employment in the elderly, if you are talking about OALA, we do have an income threshold requirement, and the latest threshold is about $7,000, and the assets limit is $210,000. Even if you go over the threshold, you are still entitled to old age allowance. So the key is they cannot go over the threshold. So we raised the threshold to $7,000 or so dollars. So for part-time employment, I'm sure the elderly would bear in mind the threshold. Mr. Chung Kwok Pan. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, I think we should rename imported labor, because they are all skilled professionals. Even for steel workers or other workers, they are skilled at their respective areas, so we shouldn't call them imported labor. And in the policy address, the chief executive gave a lot of figures and timelines on the coming construction projects. In the next 10 years, there will be 480 residential units. If we are to import construction workers, when do we have to import them, and how many do we need in order to fulfill the chief executive's targets? Do we, Secretary, do you have these statistics or timelines? The Development Bureau is working on it because they are the leading bureau. The Labor Department merely provides a platform and mechanism to facilitate and monitor the process. But as you said, according to the CIC's statistics, in the next 5 years, Hong Kong will need 10 to 15,000 more skilled workers. But for details, we really have to look at the timelines provided by the Development Bureau. Secretary, I understand you need to work with the Development Bureau, but a lot of members in the labor sector have made it clear that they would make life difficult for you at the LAB. If this happens, can this scheme still be implemented? So this is really a hypothetical question. We have always worked with the LAB. The optimized scheme, actually, we have seen some success by granting some approvals last year, and we facilitated employment for 12 local workers and 48 skilled workers. So this is not a new scheme at all. It has been in place for more than 10 years. So I think we should work together for the good of Hong Kong and the welfare of our workers. I think this is something we should achieve. Of course, this is not new, but for the Rose Garden, you imported more than 10,000 workers. So if you say you need 10 or 15,000 workers, this is not beyond our reach. Well, Mr. Chung assumed that the labor sector would hamper the government's initiatives, but this problem actually does not exist. Mr. Tang Ka-piu. Thank you, Chairman. The CIC told us that it's relatively easy for construction workers in Hong Kong to find a job. But they also thanked the government for allocating more resources, and for from 2010 to 2013, we have seen a 30% rise in the number of steel-board workers. So the lesson is we should be patient. We shouldn't import labor whenever we have problems. And according to the labor sector of Macau, more than 40% of their construction workers are imported. The figure might even be higher if you take the black market into account. And after importing the labor, the welfare of the construction workers have been compromised. So if you plan to import more labor, the development of the local construction workers would be compromised. I don't understand why the labor sector would hamper the work of LAB. But then I hope the Secretary can make a commitment that the labor sector must respect the LAB. Thank you very much for the question. On the import of labor, we would not bypass the LAB.
The The mechanism in the policy address is only to enhance the existing LAB mechanism. Secondly, it's good for young people to join the construction industry. We'd like to do more training to absorb as many new entrants as possible. But basically, for the semi-skilled workers, they need 3 to 4 years experience before they can become skilled workers. So the LAB will serve as an intermediary to fill in the gaps. Then the skilled workers can lead the semi-skilled workers such that they can become masters as soon as possible. So don't be short-sighted. We're not going to import a huge number of foreign laborers. We would like to make full use of the LAB. There won't be so many imported laborers. If we open the floodgate and admit all 1,000 in one go, it won't be good. So we'll have 200 every batch. Well, Secretary, I think you always mention the word short-sighted. I think you should change the name of your bureau. It should become a bureau for imported labor. You have to take into consideration the wishes of local workers. Many workers like the bar benders, etc., would like to enhance their skills. But you're not patient enough. You won't inject more resources by expanding, say, the 1 billion fund for training. So you don't want to consult the LAB. You want to go it alone, right? As I said, we would like to work on the basis of the LAB. So number one, I have to reiterate that we won't bypass the LAB. Number two, I believe the Development Bureau will next week give a comprehensive explanation to the panel concerned. As for this $100 million of injection in the LAB is precisely we would like to add strength to this exercise. Like the bar benders, once we have enough skilled workers, we won't need the imported workers. Mr. Sun Chong-kai, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps you have not thought about this yet. Maybe you can think about this. In the policy address, it is said that the Civil Service Bureau will, in a timely and orderly manner, try to extend the retirement age. Members asked just now how to assist the retirees to rejoin the workforce. In Hong Kong, we don't have a statutory retirement age. So civil servants can have their retirement age postponed. So, Secretary, any mechanism or method without legislation to encourage employers to postpone the retirement age of their employees. Have you started to think about this? Or would you consider this as beyond consideration? Because you said that starting from 2018, our workforce will started to decline. Well, in fact, a 60-year-old is very young. Frankly speaking, such a person has rich experience. So, any solution? Secretary? Thank you, Mr. Sin. Our focus in the coming year is to enhance promotion and publicity so as to create an elderly-friendly working environment. For example, by doing something on the working hours. After the government has extended the retirement age, it will serve as an example for the business sector. Number two, as I said in the opening remarks, the Labor Department has a subsidy scheme to encourage employers to employ the more aged employees. The LAB will also be reoriented to see how certain job types can have older workers. Take, for example, License B for security guards, covering those who are to retire at the age of 65. We would like to introduce legislative amendments such that threshold in age can be changed because many elderly can continue to serve. They have a lot of development opportunities, so it will be a win-win situation. So we would like to dismantle the barriers, and then we would like to effect educational and cultural changes as well. Secretary, I don't have the specifics from you. Just now your reply was an immediate one. Take, for example, the MPF contribution will be made all the way up to the time when the employee is 60 years old. Can we extend the employment period? Will you conduct a public consultation exercise to collect views on possible ways and means to do that? That is, I'm not asking for statutory I'm not talking about legislative amendments. Well, yes, we'll have broad publicity and promotion. As I said, we'll try to demolish the barriers where and when possible. We should make good use of our workforce. Mr. Leung Yu-chung, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Concerning the retirement age, if you legislate, I'm worried that as many workers told me, for example, the security guards, if you're to extend the retirement age from 65 to 75, will you also change the retirement age for other trades and industries? Say, for the 65-year-olds, if they work for another 5 years, they'll be able to get their provident fund. So we'll try to do something such that the employees can receive the retirement benefits at an earlier age. And just now we mentioned imported labor. You guaranteed that labor importation will not affect the job opportunities and wages of local employees. However, some employers are not in the construction industry. When they negotiate with their employees on wages, they'll say, now the government has given the green light for labor importation. It doesn't matter if you quit. I'll try to apply to the government. Although the government says that the scheme is not for all trades and industries, the employers will make use of that scheme as an excuse to bargain with the employees. And some job types, particularly the disadvantaged job types, the employees will lose their bargaining power. This phenomenon was common in the past. So this may happen in certain job types. How are you going to guard against that? That is question 2. Question 3. I mentioned this to you. If you want to unleash the working potentials, you have to do matching work. For example, you should provide childcare services such that the women can find it comfortable to undergo retraining programs. Yes, there are such programs, but not much resources was put into that. And there are no extra resources for the institutions to help those women who have children. So, if you want to do it, will you tell the ERB to provide more resources to the institutions such that the children can be taken care of and then the women can join the workforce? 3 questions. First of all, about the retirement age of 65 for License B security guards. These security guards can choose to retire at the age of 65. In future, they have a choice. The right rests with the employee. In future, there won't be such a situation as the security guard has to compulsorily require at the age of 65. Number 2, for the construction industry, we're talking about this enhanced scheme for skilled workers for the construction industry only. We did not mention any other industries. So your worry did not appear. We're talking about infrastructure-related projects, public housing-related projects. Number 3, to give more resources to the ERB to unleash the working potentials of women. I'll, of course, reflect your views to the ERB. From a macro point of view, I'll explain to the Welfare Services panel what we'll do for childcare services in the coming years. For those below 6 years old, we'll have a few more thousand quotas, and service hours will be extended to 9 p.m. At the moment, we only have 1,000 places. In future, 5,000 more, so altogether 6,000. For after-school childcare services, some will operate till 9 p.m., and some centers will in future operate on public holidays as well, say for the first 3 days of the Lunar New Year. So this will be very helpful for the parents. And we have $200 million earmarked for after-school childcare services. So there will be comprehensive help for families. Yes, we must do our childcare services well before we can unleash the working potential of women. Ms. Chen Yunhan, Secretary, I listened very attentively to you. Just now you seem to hand over the labor importation scheme to the Development Bureau. It seems that it's not your business, but the message I received was that it's your business. You must not bypass the LAB. Absolutely not. But there are 6 employer representatives and 6 employee representatives in the LAB. If they can't reach a consensus, I heard that the Commissioner for Labor can make a decision. I scratch my head about this. If you want to import labor for a particular job type, the decision is to be made by the C4L. And then we have the task force with 3 employers' representatives and 3 employees' representatives. Again, the Commissioner for Labor will have the final say. Is that the case? Mr. Tong, so when no consensus is reached, you will have the final say. Is that correct? I'm not harboring conspiracy theory. In paragraph 39, you say that objectively you're going to relax the criteria for labor importation. Well, that's what I heard. The Commissioner for Labor will have the final say. Have you finished with your question? Can they answer your questions? Mr. Chairman, I have to make some clear remarks here. First of all, the LAB serves as an advisory body ever since 1996 on labor importation. Employers and employees' representatives will only offer advice. So it's an advisory role. The Commissioner will respect the views on both sides, and then he'll look at the objective facts. If the labor inspector says that there are false information, the LAB will definitely not grant the application. You have to answer my question squarely. That is, when the employers and the employees cannot reach a consensus on labor importation, then the Commissioner for Labor will make the decision, right? Well, the Commissioner for Labor can supplement in a moment, so you are cheating us. The LAB is a body to cheat us. No. We'll have to look at the justifications and facts on both sides. Honestly speaking, objectively, you're already changing the past practice. If the working group under the LAB has gone through the facts, if your advisors don't agree, the Commissioner for Labor still have the final say. Honestly speaking, even if I loudly oppose you, my effort will be futile. Well, we may argue and argue very strongly, but the government may favor those who want to import labor. As Mr. Tang Ka-piu said, there are a lot of ways and means to supplement labor shortage.
And in this subcommittee, in past meetings, for skilled workers, for certain skilled workers, they are allowed to be imported. But for other kinds of skilled workers, which do not need to be, in which we do not need imported workers, you shouldn't import them. Members, you have mentioned that please don't have a conversation between yourselves. I've made it very clear that the Commissioner would comprehensively consider the views from both sides, including the LAB. And with enough justifications, the Commissioner will respect the view of the LAB. Ms. Chen, simply speaking, the Labor Department would look at the results of the 4-week recruitment process to see whether the applicant has made an effort to hire local workers. When we look at the LAB's recommendation, if they object to the Labor Department's recommendation, we would try to find out the reasons, because they need to justify themselves. If the relevant information has been provided by the applicant, then we can refer to that. If the information has not been provided by the applicant, we can explain that to the LAB. And under the SLS, or Supplementary Labor Scheme, the applicant has the right to review the decision made by the Commissioner of Labor with regards to their SLS application. So when we vet the application, we must provide a reason for objecting or denying the application. So the LAB must provide justifications, and we will relay these justifications to the applicant. So that's the usual practice of the government. We must provide well-grounded reasons. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, before you arrived, I saw that you have a board that says WITS review. We decided to launch an open hearing on the review of WITS. My friend asked me to bring this here today. Commissioner, Secretary, Mr. Tong, your elaborations have been very clear today. So can you, all I ask from you is to arrest those who, the ATV executives who refuse to give salary to their staff. You have explained a lot about the LAB. And all workers in Hong Kong are looking at you to take action against poor employers. And you said, the secretary said they are, well, we have 3 JPs here today, not mentioning Miss Annie Tam. Are JPs allowed to make prosecutions? Yes, they can. Have you read the Justice of Peace Ordinance? I think you should, this is something you have to do first in order to earn my respect, as well as there is respect for the Secretary. The Secretary ought to remind the Commissioner that if ATV continues to default the wage payments, and you are not taking any action, you are not making any prosecutions, ATV would be a disgrace and offense to all labor unions and workers in Hong Kong. Stop mentioning about the LAB, because the LAB is the black sheep. we just had a soccer game with the Hong Kong Bar Association, and if the opposite side were given a penalty kick before the final whistle went, so what are we going to do? In terms of policy, opening up the policy is important. We have more than 3 million workers in Hong Kong. You might find them gullible, but they must know what our policy is, what our labor policy is. I think you are trying to lower your training costs by importing workers. If you train a lot of workers, but you cannot provide enough vacancies, we would have problems. So what can these workers do in the future if you don't have enough jobs? So this is one problem. You were talking about occupational safety, worker dignity. That's all in vain if employers plainly refuse to give wages and you are allowing, continuing to allow ATV to broadcast their shows. This is completely nonsense. People always ask me to do something useful for everyone. So please do something. I give you 1 week. Arrest them, prosecute them. Thank you, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. Do you need a response? I'll be brief. You haven't even they haven't even given the wages for December. We have issued 32 summonses. So what's the use? The police called me. Mr. Leung, please allow the secretary to respond. For the payment for the wages in November, we would carry out prosecutions on advice from the DOJ. Mr. Tommy Chang. The speaker is off the microphone. I think I have not seen the worst Secretary for Labour and Welfare who is worse than Mr. Matthew Cheung or Ms. Chen Ken-Mei-Wah. Well, is that a personal insult? That's all right. He can sue me if he wants. You are only helping the workers. You are they are only helping the workers, but they've done nothing for the employers. I think this bureau should be renamed Destruction of Our Economy Bureau, and they have introduced this minimum wage. And as a result of their policies, a lot of the small businesses can hardly survive. I have not attended any opening ceremonies for restaurants in the last 3 months. So under the current economic climate, restaurants cannot find enough workers. So naturally, there have not been any new businesses. And they said they will have large job fairs. They will launch job fairs to encourage youngsters to enter the mainland labor market. So so what's going on now? Are we looking at a 10% unemployment rate in Hong Kong? So if you want to export our talent, why do people complain about importing talent from the mainland? I think well, I would rather save my breath than suggesting that to the secretary. The wages in mainland have almost caught up with that of Hong Kong. And the advantage is that their competitive advantage is that their workers are more hardworking than those of Hong Kong. 2 years ago, the Liberal Party reminded the government that during a Q&A session hosted by the chief executive, he said this is something which can be considered, but now the secretary said this is not something under consideration. At that time, the Liberal Party noticed that there were lots of major government infrastructures. We need a lot of construction workers for public housing projects. So that was the only thing the Liberal Party mentioned. We didn't mention other things because we don't want any complaints from labor unions. You are destroying Hong Kong's economy in the long term. You should rename your bureau. The Finance Committee approved several hundred million dollars for major infrastructures, and the landfill and incinerator will be postponed by 3 years because you cannot find the manpower. I don't really need an answer, and I'm not interested in listening to him. Well, I have another meeting to catch, so let's leave it at that. So Mr. Tommy Cheung doesn't need an answer. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Chairman. Paragraphs 25 to 27 of the documents mentioned enhancing publicity and education efforts to encourage wider adoption of family-friendly employment practices, or FFEP. So these 3 paragraphs are rather meaningless because the only thing it said is to encourage employment, but there isn't any concrete measures such as legislation. So I don't really see the government's commitment. We have about 1,800 companies taking part in FFEP. So statistically, what's the percentage of FFEP companies to all companies in Hong Kong? What's the proportion? The FTU has been fighting for paternity leave for 9 years. And there's a code of practice, a set of code of practice issued in February 2009. So 16 years has passed, and are we seeing any family-friendly employment practices today? Well, that was 6 years. Excuse me, it was should be 6 years. And the code mentioned that there should be 7 days of paternity leave and a 5-day working week for the retail sector, flexible working hours, a cap on the number of working hours, and so-called parental leave. That means employees can take leave when their parents have birthdays. And employee training was mentioned, and employees were encouraged to do exercise and family support, neighborhood support, etc. We've been talking about all these measures for 6 years, but to this day, how many of these measures have been implemented in Hong Kong? So that's a really big question mark. And on this year's policy address, on paragraphs in 141 and 142, it has been mentioned that childcare services and family-friendly measures will be stepped up. So what are the specific recommendations? Or do we still have to rely on the incentive scheme? This is something I want to know about.
In 2009, we tried to reflect to the trades and industries our incentive schemes. In recent years, we got breakthrough with the paternity leave issue. We got 3 days. And for the civil service, we've got this 5-day week measure. Just now, in answering Mr. Leung Yu-chung's question, and let me repeat that we would strengthen our childcare services, including after-school childcare services. The operation hours will be extended to 9 p.m. and we'll have 5,000 more places. At the moment, with only 1,000 odd places. In certain districts, we've already implemented the measure. Some centers operate till 9 p.m. And say for the first 3 days in the Lunar New Year, we operate throughout the year. And then with the participation of the business sector, we'll have a huge number of childcare places. Due to time constraints, sorry, I cannot entertain a second round. Mr. Lee Chok-yan and Ms. Chen Yun-han, sorry, we're well behind schedule, so to speak, and we have 2 to 3 items to go. So thank you very much, Secretary. Our next issue will be for the Secretary for Education. Please invite the Secretary for Education to come in. We welcome Mr. Eddie Ng, Secretary for Education, and Mr. Brian Low, Deputy Secretary for Education, and his Principal Assistant Secretary, Ms. Pak Vin Yong, for attending this meeting. They will brief us on the CE's 2015 policy address and answer members' questions. Secretary, would you please brief us on the policy address in relation to manpower and education? Last Wednesday, the CE announced its 2015 policy address. Today, I focus on the qualifications framework, the progress since last year. In 2008, we launched the QF to encourage lifelong learning and to enhance comprehensively the quality, professionalism, and competitiveness of the workforce. Now, we've got 20 instead of 19 ITACs, Industry Training Advisory Committees. The number of employees covered has increased from 48% to 52%, and 20 industries are covered. And 17 ITACs have already got specification of competency standards to spell out the competency standards for the industries concerned. And 10 industries got the recognition of prior learning mechanisms. After the 2014 policy address, we formally announced on the 1st of September last year a QF fund totaling $1 billion, as well as a steering committee on the QF fund to be responsible for the policies, strategies, and management of the fund. In the past 4 months, we convened one meeting and started work. The fund will provide to the framework stable income so as to develop different projects, including subvented bodies and organizations accreditation, and to ensure the quality of training programs. Then will be competency-based and will also have generic skill training programs. There will also be study projects and public education projects. We'll make full use of the QF fund to promote lifelong learning. Besides, to allow interfacing among different levels of qualifications and to provide a promotion ladder for the employees starting from the 1st of July. We started the credit accumulation and transfer policy and principles and have published a set of guidelines. We also encourage training institutions to develop their training programs and have cross-discipline development projects. In March 2014, together with the New Zealand authorities, we signed an agreement on collaboration agreements to foster exchanges and experience sharing. In November, together with the European Union, we started this skill reference work between Hong Kong and the EU with quality assurance authorities will have mutual understanding and collaboration. And recently, we started working meetings in Beijing as well. Here, I welcome views from members on the future development of the QF. Thank you. 6 members, Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan, Dr. Chang Lai-wan, Mr. Poon Siu Ping, Ms. Chen Yun-han, Mr. Sin Chung Kai, and Mr. Chung Kwok Pan would like to speak. Any more? No? Then 4 minutes per member. Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan. Mr. Chairman, maybe the policy address has slapped the secretary on his face. It said that labor has to be imported. That means our talents are not good enough. Your training programs cannot catch up with the requirements, so we need to import labor. Now, the secretary is a member on the committee on population policy. We don't have enough social workers, teachers, foremen, engineers. That's what they say about the talent list. Have you ever read the talent list? Do you admit that the private sector is progressing very slowly and our tertiary institutions have not been turning out sufficient talents? That's why we need this QF. And QF may not reach the tertiary institutions because levels 5 and 7 come under the tertiary levels. So is it that we do not have enough talents? That's why we need a talent list. Have you read the talent list? It said that Hong Kong do not have sufficient talents. So how are you going to nurture talents in Hong Kong? Secretary? Thank you for the questions. The QF mainly targets the enhancement of the quality of our population. That's under the Committee on Population Policy. We would like our workforce to have pluralistic development as well as cross-discipline development. There must be indicators for our employees to climb up the employment ladder. So the QF is very helpful to our workforce. That's why the popularity rate has been increased from 48% to 52%. Secondly, population policy has 2 directions. We have to study demands and understand the details. That's the start of the recommendation. We need to spend time on this study. Talent list is just a concept. We need time to implement it. Mr. Chairman, it said that the talent list covers 100 job types. Is it that we do not have enough talents for those 100 job types? And Secretary, you cannot evade your responsibilities. By this talent list, they mean they need to import more labor. That is to obstruct the upward mobility of young people and local employees. That also indicates that the QF training programs cannot meet the demands of Hong Kong. So can you clarify whether there are 100-odd job types in the talent list? Is there a talent list? Are there so many job types? Secretary. One of our strategies is to start studying the feasibility of a talent list. If you look at the population policy of the OECD, you see that a talent list should be multifaceted. I asked whether you already have a talent list. We just have some preliminary discussions. We don't have a list. He mentioned preliminary discussion. That means there's a talent list. Is there a talent list? We discussed whether or not the talent list should be one of our employment strategies. So you don't yet formally have a talent list. Now you preliminarily discussed the talent list. I'm only one of the members. We just discussed how a talent list can form part of our strategies. So there's no formal talent list yet. Dr. Chung Lai-wan. Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to ask the Secretary this. The QF was launched in 2008. Up to this moment, how effective is it? Have we attained our original targets? Secretary, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Chung. This is a good question. In the past 6 years of implementation, there are a lot of areas to be mentioned. Mr. Chairman, the QF was launched in 2008. Over 6 years have elapsed since then. We implemented the QF from several angles. Now, to promote the QF, the most important thing is to have support from the industries concerned. We have established, in the past 6 years, 19 ITACs for 20 industries. And the number of employees covered amounts to 52% of our total workforce. So you can see to what extent the QF is recognized. This is an indicator. And last September, we formally set up a QF fund to give financial support for the promotion of the QF, for studies, promotion, and accreditation. So we're working on those areas. Still, we don't yet have quantitative indicators. In the past years, in fact, now, in the past few years, for supporting the QF, we've already spent over $80 million. To 359 training institutions, we provided over $60 million of subvention, covering $4,200 of accreditation fee, and over 11,000 employees underwent qualifications assessment and got reimbursed. So in terms of industries, employees, and training program accreditation, we've provided different support. We cannot conclude at this juncture how effective the QF is, but from the number of industries covered, the training programs accredited, and the number of employees attending the training programs, we can somehow quantify the effectiveness of the QF. Dr. Chung Lai-wan, I very much support the QF. Last year in the policy address, the CE said that for the QF, he would like to assist those who do not possess university degrees. no bachelor's degrees, no master's degrees, no doctoral degrees, such that they can join training programs and have upward mobility. We should take care of the young people and do more publicity among employers.
At this moment, how many personnel associations would conduct recruitment via this QF framework? Do you have such figures? So thank you very much for the question, and this question is also very significant. Certain industries would provide preference to candidates with QF qualifications. So we can see the healthy growth of this framework, and this $1 billion endowment fund would allow the QF to continue to grow. Mr. Poon Siu Ping. Thank you, Chairman. The QF aims to promote lifelong learning and facilitates value adding for employees, which is a good thing. But when we look at the situation in Hong Kong, a lot of people work very long hours and they get off work very late and they can hardly find time to upgrade themselves. We have raised the proposal of paid leave multiple times. We've raised this idea to the Labour and Welfare Bureau, and they said that's the job of the Education Bureau. And in order to enhance the qualifications framework, would you consider introducing paid education leave or training leave? And as mentioned in the paper, the Education Bureau has worked with neighboring cities or countries apart from the mainland, European Union, New Zealand, etc. Is there a mutual recognition of the qualifications between Hong Kong and these regions or countries? And in the coming future, what other countries or regions will you visit? This is a very good question. For the first part, for paid education leave, we can look at it from two aspects. For activities directly related to the Education Bureau, for example, on-the-job training allowance, we have already started work in certain industries. For example, the E&M industry. When we look at the relevant HR studies, lots of big corporations in Hong Kong would offer paid training leave. That's an incentive for employees, and it's also a very effective HR strategy. Usually, these corporations would provide 5 to 7 days of paid education leave. And in promoting these measures, we hope employers can also benefit from QF. We hope that employers can also play a role in the QF ladders, and we hope that they would also recognize the QF qualifications and provide an incentive for the employees. So for the second question on the global exchanges and frameworks, more than 7,000 in Hong Kong have global offices. If we can enhance cooperation with different countries, they would be more confident of Hong Kong, of the labor force in Hong Kong. And in promoting QF, we can enhance international recognition. New Zealand is one example. In Southeast Asia, we are beginning work as well. We can see that a lot of students in Hong Kong have started to find jobs in the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned that some big corporations or exemplary employers already have such measures in place, but if the government does not study legislation, we cannot promote this culture of offering paid education leave. 3 more members would like to ask questions. We have 10 minutes each. It seems that we have to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Next, Ms. Chen Yunhan. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, the development of the qualifications framework as a labor union, we were heavily involved. In the early days, we thought this is necessary. And I think it's a good idea that people can see what level they're at through the corresponding qualifications. But you've ignored people who are already working and people who cannot find time for studying. These people have lost the opportunity, and since they have to work very long hours, it's very difficult for them to study. Before standard working hours is in force, you listed some big corporations, but a lot of workers want to be self-sustaining. I recall that a labor union held some Chinese and Western cuisine classes for catering workers. So I was very touched at that time. You said you want to promote lifelong learning, but what have you done to actually help these people? This does not seem to be, this seems to have nothing to do with the Education Bureau. But I think you should have internal briefing sessions among yourselves. I think this is something you must do. A lot of new immigrants have the qualifications, but their qualifications are not being recognized. But they are talents in themselves, and they do have respectable education attainment. And they find life very difficult in Hong Kong. So what's your view on this? In the past, these training programs were taken up by VTC, and now it's taken up by the government. I was a director at VTC for 6 years. We have not done any technical training for our workers. Apart from the construction industry, we need training in many other industries. For instance, kitchen workers for the catering industry, carers, etc. We should have a lot of training courses. Of course, there must be policy backup as well. Of course, this is the scope of the VTC, and VTC was set up because during the 60s we needed a lot of skilled workers. So there was apprenticeship programs, and as such, Hong Kong's various industries were able to develop very healthily in Hong Kong. And today, you should recruit these workers and train them afterwards. So this is something you should consider. It does not seem to be one of your scope of work, but I hope you can address to my 3 questions. Thank you very much for the questions. These 3 questions are all very important. For the first, the QF is important in a way that it allows working people to have the chance to study and upgrade themselves, and upon completion, their efforts would be recognized, and this would benefit their careers. So that's the basic premise. So when we implement this framework, we have done a lot of work for different industries. For working people who would like to study, there's Ms. Chen Yun-han, please don't have a conversation among yourselves. And in the workplace, through VTC or the 11 committees, we have introduced new programs at the VTC. They are doing something for the retail industry, and we are also doing something for the E&M industry. So we are helping these industries one by one. And our work has been very well received by the employees so far, which is encouraging to see. And in the first year, in the second year, we have $2,000 from us, $8,000 from the employer. And for the third year, employees are able to find a job and they can earn a stable income. So this is something we will push out phase by phase. We understand that a system is required to deal with all these industries. We work with these VTC in a lot of scopes apart from the qualifications framework. We do a lot to enhance teaching and learning. And we provided on-the-job allowance for about 9,000 VTC trainees last year. And we have dedicated staff in charge. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. The Secretary said they spent more than $80 million and more than 10,000 staff or employees were able to benefit, apart from the $80 or so million fund. Can you provide any statistics? You said 52% of the workforce has been covered under the QF. Can you provide specific figures? After 6 years of efforts, how many workers or practitioners have actually been recognized under QF? Can you provide any figures on the participation rates? You said 55% of the workforce was covered by the QF. How much of this percentage were able to be recognized under QF? Do you understand Mr. Sin's question? I think I understand what he meant. Perhaps I will invite the PAS to address this question. Thank you very much for the question. The QF has been in operation for more than 5 years. And we can look at it from two parts. The first part, through the QF, we have a lot of training courses. And the relevant practitioners would obtain qualifications after completing these courses. But we don't have figures on how many practitioners have taken part in or completed these training courses. In Annex 1, you can see or in Annex A, you can see details of the recognition of prior learning mechanism. Some practitioners have been in an industry for a length of time, and their experience can be recognized under this RPL mechanism by prospective employers. And this mechanism has been applied to 10 industries, and as of the end of last year, we have processed almost 12,000 applications, and a number of certificates have been issued, which meant that their qualifications have been approved. So you can take these figures as reference. You said 52% of the workforce is covered, and the participation rate seems to be only about 2% if only 20,000 workers are involved. QF is only one part. The other part is training courses offered in different industries. In the past, they didn't need to take part in these courses.
Of the 52% of the workforce, what's the participation rate among the industries? Perhaps I should supplement. 20 industries are covered. The starting point and time of each industry is different. Say, for example, property management is more mature. Sales, more mature. Hairdressing, beauty. Oh, of course, I understand that there are different degrees of maturity. But can you provide us with the participation rates? Can you provide the figures to the LegCo? Secretary, you may not have the figures here, but when you go back and dig out the figures, can you answer Mr. Sin's question in writing? Yes. Next, Mr. Chung Kwok-pan. Thank you, Chairman. This QF system is very useful if it is implemented well. Of course, we only had 6 years of experience. The statistics may not be able to reflect the full picture. For the garment industry, we're prepared to set up an ITAC as well. I told the Secretary last week. I talked to the Secretariat of QF. They asked us to forge consensus first before they'll form an ITAC. What do you mean by consensus? 50% support, 60% support, or 100% support from the industry members? The QF Secretariat failed to give me an answer. They mentioned consensus. I asked what consensus is. Secondly, as the Deputy Secretary said, 20 industries have already formed their ITACs. But what we want to see is, after participation, after obtaining qualifications under the QF, they should receive assistance in job seeking, promotion, and so forth. There should be actual benefits for the participants. So in future, you should have manpower to understand whether or not the industry members actually benefited. If the result is that there's not much difference between having a QF or not having a QF, then the QF is not very successful. Besides, I'd like the Secretary to strive more in terms of collaboration with overseas jurisdictions, in terms of job seeking, promotion, and working overseas. This is absolutely helpful. Secretary? Thank you, Mr. Chung. Perhaps I should explain what consensus is. Say there are 100 members in the industry and 5 professional bodies. If there's only one participating, that is a 20% participation rate, then we really cannot implement the QF. So we must have a start in order to forge consensus. If the participation rate is not high enough, past experience shows that the QF won't be very successful then. So any standard for participation rate? Well, if the major professional bodies can sit down to forge a consensus, say a simple majority support, then the QF or the ITAC will have representativeness. As for the fund, part of the fund is used for studies. Mr. Chung is very correct. We have to study whether or not the training programs are useful. So part of the fund will be for studies. In the past, we didn't have resources for studies. We just started for 4 months, and we've already looked into practicable studies. What about mutual recognition with other jurisdictions? Oh, yes, we are gradually attaining something. What about the recent progress? Recently, we studied with the Guangdong province whether or not we can have 1 certificate for 3 purposes. So no mutual recognition with overseas jurisdictions yet. Next, Mr. Tang Ka-piu. Of course, the FTU supports and participates in the QF for certain industries. But we would like to take another step further. That is to convert the ITAC into something concrete for the development of the industry concerned, so as to serve as a platform to develop, say, employees' benefits. That is, we would like to make it a platform for collective bargaining. I'd like to raise a specific question for specific industries. I think the chairman is very familiar with this. We have a trade union for the seamen and sailors. Of course, the incumbent members don't just want to remain as an ordinary seaman or sailor. They would like to become a captain. But then they discover that after serving as a captain, they don't have a QF to recognize their qualification as a captain. But in the UK, experience as a captain will be recognized as a master when they go back on land. But this is not the case in Hong Kong. Some captains actually go to the IV institutions to train other people. But then the experience as a captain won't qualify them as masters, so they get a lower paid. So for the profession of seamen, would you please try to do something such that we can set up a QF for many similar industries? Secretary? Now, our viewpoint is as follows. Number one, for the 7 levels under the QF, we would like them to gradually link up with traditional qualifications, academic qualifications, like a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a doctoral degree. Level 5 is equivalent to a bachelor's degree, but we would like to work within the individual industries first. We should set the standards for, say, levels 3 and 4, say whether or not they should be treated as equivalent to a higher diploma, etc. Besides, I'd like to remind members that in the course of recruitment, if somebody wants to change trade or industry, we have this credit accumulation and transfer policy. We'll talk about basic competency. The fund is just set up, so we just have resources to do the work. But that's what we'll do. Well, will you proactively liaise with the trade unions of the seamen and sailors? Will they actually possess professional qualifications, or rather experience? But this is a matter of linkage with the traditional academic qualifications, traditional credits. Well, seafaring is not yet covered among the 20 industries. But in fact, we've already contacted the relevant trade associations and trade unions. I'll go back and contact the Transport and Housing Bureau after this meeting. Ms. Chen Yunhan, sorry, not enough time. Originally, we intended to discuss the request from the 3 members here, whether or not we should set up 2 subcommittees. But the other members have left. Apparently, we cannot consider that issue today. According to the Secretariat, under the House Committee, there's no more time slot, no more slot for another subcommittee. So maybe we should wait till the next meeting before we can discuss the establishment of the two subcommittees. In any case, I'd like to inform you that you have to consider the terms of reference, the issues to be handled, etc., as well as which subcommittee should come first. But of course, the floor shouldn't be monopolized by the three proponents. We have to consult other members as well. Ms. Chen Yunhan, first of all, according to my experience, can we endorse the proposal first? So the three of us plus you. Well, the feeling won't be that good. But then we can queue up earlier. Oh no, we cannot queue up at all. There's no waiting list. Oh, Secretary, you and your team can be excused first. We have to discuss other issues. Thank you very much. The Welfare Services Panel also wants to set up subcommittees. I understand your point. Well, let's see what we can do. Of course, I understand that it's not very good for the proponents to endorse their own proposals. But then we still have 1 month to go before the next regular meeting. Can we consult the other members by way of circulation? But we need to discuss the issue. That is, do members agree to set up the two subcommittees? And we have to discuss the procedures. And the subcommittee proposed for offsetting severance payments, etc., is more complicated. We may need to consult the Financial Affairs Panel. We may need to have a joint subcommittee. Obviously, the administration has responded to our questions on the MPF. That is, Mrs. Carrie Lam, the CS for administration, said that the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau will be responsible for the MPF, that is, offsetting, the offsetting issue. But for long service payment, it's for the LWB to handle, so we cannot do it by way of circulation. Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid that this will be further postponed for another month. I agree that we have to have a discussion on this, but can we obtain the opinion of other members by way of a circular that is in writing? Well, this is a rather complicated issue. I mean, standard working hours. All right, for the subcommittee proposed for standard working hours, we can do it by way of circulation. But the other one involving MPF cannot be done by circulation, because some outsiders want to discuss the issue also. Any other business? Today we have no other business, so it's time for us to adjourn. Thank you.